we have a media class in this country that does not hold power to account. We need to support those journalists that are doing the real work of holding the government to account. The mask is truly slipping. When, the illegal invasion from Russia took place, we needed more voices, obviously, to criticize that. Putin is a dictator, a gangster, and there are war crimes that have been committed. But Zelensky isn't a friend of the working class either. The only people that benefit from conflict in Ukraine and in Gaza or anywhere else are arms manufacturers and people who profit from the arms industry. NATO inherently is an imperialist war machine, and you'll get people who defend NATO saying it's about peace and it's about security. Every single pound that is spent on missiles, tanks and bombs is money that is divested from our houses, our healthcare and our future. And even now they're still saying we have suspended arms sales to Israel. No, you haven't. You still sell components for F-35 fighter jets that allow £2,000 bombs to drop on communities in Gaza and destroy people's lives. I'm genuinely speechless because we can all see what's happening. Despite everything that's happened over the past few weeks, we as your party would win 13 seats. I see that as just the floor. Our potential is much higher. We are providing a different option, and that's a socialist option.
Zarah Sultana, welcome to PoliticsJOE. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
In Joe Yellow as well.
On brand.
So we're here to talk about your party. I think I'll just start by asking you, why is your party, in your opinion, the best placed party to beat reform?
We are best placed to beat reform because we are interested in making people's lives better. Reform are interested in peddling racism, scapegoating migrants, Muslims and minorities, but that racism is a distraction from their real agenda, which is more privatization, more deregulation, more cuts for everyone else, but at the same time, giving handouts and tax breaks to the super rich. And that is the politics that has prevailed for decades in this country, that has seen inequality go through the roof and people suffering. We are a nation of food banks. We have more food banks than McDonald's restaurants. So your party is here to provide an explicitly socialist agenda, an anti-imperialist agenda, and also an anti-Zionist agenda. We understand that we have to build from the bottom up. Westminster parties are top down. Decisions are made in back rooms, stitched up in headquarters, and there is no real empowering of members. And what we want to build is a member-led party that has democracy at the heart of it, that is ingrained within our communities, our trade unions, in street movements. When the fascists turn up, we turn up, we're on the picket lines, and we're supporting our communities and building that real power, because power truly lies in our communities. And I saw that as a community organizer because before I got elected, I worked as a community organizer in the West Midlands. I worked in Wolverhampton, Halesong and Stourbridge. And there's loads of people who say, we don't do politics, everyone's all the same. And then you do mass listening and you identify the issues that people care about, like their GP surgery closing, the bus route to the hospital being scrapped. And then you build campaigns and people realize the power that they have. So we will beat reform electorally by addressing the issues that affect people's everyday lives, and that is insecure work, poor housing, wages that don't cover the bills, an NHS on its knees, and public services struggling, but will be present every single day, not just during an election cycle.
There's so much I want to dig into there, the anti-Zionism, the anti-imperialism, having a mass grassroots-led party. But for starting a new party, it's a very difficult thing.
It's not easy. Yeah. It's not easy at all.
I was wondering if you've looked to Europe and how other parties in Europe, insurgent left-wing parties in Europe, have done it, have gained electoral success. And obviously they're operating largely in a different system, not in the two-party sort of Westminster system. But
yes, only a few weeks ago I was in Paris for an anti-war conference that was organised by MPs from La France Insoumise. There were MPs MPs from the Workers' Party in Belgium. There were MPs from Spain. And what I've learned from all of those colleagues, including many of whom travelled to the UK recently for The World Transformed, is that every socialist left-wing party has teething issues. And what we have experienced is quite normal when you speak to Jean-Luc Mélenchon, when you talk to Peter Mertens from the Belgian Workers' Party. And it's really important we understand why those teething problems happen, and it's to make this party truly democratic and how you move on from that. And what I found is that there is a lot of emphasis on the psychodrama that has taken place over the past few weeks, but every event that I've done, and I've lost count, I've been in Sheffield, I've been in Newcastle, I've been in Bristol, Devon, recently in Manchester, Liverpool, and so many other places. People are genuinely excited and want us to move forward. They just want to get involved and active and do things. And that is the job that is before us, building towards conference in November, the regional assemblies that are taking place, and making sure that this is a truly democratic party.
And looking at them as more developed, further into their journey, left-wing parties, do you think there's anything else, any ideas, anything that you've seen that you want to take from them and implement in your party?
Well, if we look at especially La France Insoumise, it's nearly a decade since the movement, because they don't refer to themselves as a party, was established. And in particular, the coalition that they built under the New Popular Front to challenge Le Pen and stop the fascists from gaining power in France. I think there's lessons to learn there. When we look at the Belgian Workers' Party and the health clinics that they provide in their local community and the support that they give to trade unions, when we look at De Linke and the fact that where they have branch offices, they provide household items like dishwashers and interest-free loans for people who are struggling. Because when you help people, you show them that you truly care for them. You're not just interested in their vote. And then when an election comes, people can see the work that you've been doing for a long period of time and put their trust in you. So I think there's a lot of lessons to learn. And I think that's why it's important that we don't just focus on elections. Because if you just focus electorally and if your emphasis is just electoral and you forget the social base, then when an MP retires or loses their seat, you are quite irrelevant. But if you just focus on building social power, you provide a vacuum, or you create a vacuum which the far right will fill. So you have to invest in both, and you have to see them equally.
And I guess, well, it is very difficult for insurgent parties in the UK because of that sort of two-party system that we mentioned kind of works against them as opposed to more PR-based system.
I think that's gone. I think that's broken. And I think that's what makes politics so exciting. At the last election, there were MPs in Leicester, Blackburn, Dewsbury, Birmingham, and Jeremy and Islington North who were elected as independents. And when we see the rise of reform and we see your party, you can see that the offer to the British public is more diverse. You've got the Labour Party that has shifted entirely to the right, and they're not being quiet about it as well. When we think about the attacks on our civil liberties, when we look at austerity that's coming through this Labour Party, people want to have a choice on the ballot. And what we're providing them is an explicitly socialist choice on that ballot paper.
I wonder do you still see the sort of traditional media and how it's embedded in the sort of two-party politics of the UK as working against you? Because specifically, I'd like to mention, in case people weren't aware, what happened over the weekend when a Daily Express journalist replied to a comment that wished for your deportation. And in response, you said, "Our media class is rotten to the core."
I believe that wholeheartedly. We have a media class in this country that does not hold power to account. We have client journalism, and for access to Downing Street exclusives, you see journalists that are incredibly toady, and that is because of Zone 2 dinner party invites that they are more passionate about than telling the stories that are taking place in our communities. And I believe that's why we need to have local journalists, local media, left-wing media. So we need to support those journalists that are doing the real work of holding the government to account, whether it's about genocide in Gaza, or the fact that this government at the moment is doing some mental gymnastics in allowing racist football hooligans from Israel to come to this country, despite the fact that a derby in Tel Aviv was cancelled and their own football club is saying that they won't sell tickets. Yet this government is so insistent on defending genocide and apartheid that they will actually defy logic and gaslight the rest of us. So that's why I have very little trust in mainstream media. And actually, Christian Calgi in particular, his response showed me that the mask is truly slipping. The discourse that we have seen drip-fed from politicians, right from the very top, your Suella Bravermans, your Priti Patels, even now your Shabana Mahmoods, has been supported by the front pages in this country. And so the violence that we see in our streets, that is the result of that. And when I received that half-hearted, mealy-mouthed apology, Christian Calgi was sorry that he was called out, rather than the fact that he wants a British MP to be deported.
I'm mentioning, just as you did, that it starts from the top often. And we saw Katie Lamb telling the Sunday Times, she believes lots of legally settled people must be deported to ensure Britain is mostly culturally coherent, her words, and that multiculturalism has failed. Are we witnessing a race to the bottom between the Conservatives and Reform?
It is absolutely frightening. And this is why on the left we say an attack on one is an attack on all. When the right-wing press and right-wing journalists attack refugees and migrants, and then politicians start to attack indefinite leave to remain, and the Labour government suspends family reunifications, we know that they're not going to just stop at the most marginalised in our community, who are refugees and asylum seekers, that actually they will keep going further and further, and that's why you can't give them an inch. For Katie Lamb and others, they have to be asked the question, who do they think should live in this country? Who has a right to be in this country? Because I'm Muslim and South Asian, do I not belong? And that's why our politics is not about who is born here, it's who is here. It doesn't matter how you got here. The fact that you live in this country, you are in our communities, you are already making this country a better place, and we have to defend everyone's rights because they're coming for us all.
And I guess to pivot slightly, you've made it quite clear how you feel about NATO. You'd like the UK to leave. You've called the NATO alliance imperialist and said that your party needs to be anti-imperialist. Does the UK need to go further and cut more or all ties with the US? Because I'm guessing the belief that it's imperialist is coming from the US's.
Yes, the UK is America's poodle. And we saw that with Iraq. We have seen that with so many foreign interventions. And NATO inherently is an imperialist war machine. And you'll get people who defend NATO saying it's about peace and it's about security. But you look at its track record, you look at Afghanistan, you look at Libya, endless wars that have made all of us less safe. And the argument to the British public is that every single pound that is spent on missiles, tanks and bombs is money that is divested from our houses, our healthcare and our future. And most people would agree that they would rather have an NHS that is fully funded, more council houses, green jobs, than bombs, missiles and tanks that actually make us all less safe.
I mean, GCHQ have said there's been massive cyber attacks on the UK coming from Russia. Would you like to see the UK in a sort of European security alliance? Or I guess, how does security look?
Our future crises look like pandemics, climate catastrophe, and that's what we need to be investing in. And obviously that involves cyber warfare. Being involved with NATO doesn't address any of those. And I think working globally to address those issues around cyber warfare and how you will get foreign governments intervening in elections is very important. We saw that in the US. But at the core of this is that as a party, we must have policy about immediately withdrawing from NATO. And the fact that no other party has that position makes us quite unique in that. And it's about selling it on the doorstep. The arguments are already there. When you look at polls, people are the majority of people are against war, they're against genocide, they support nationalisation and they support workers' rights, and that's the package we can offer. And withdrawing from NATO, I think will sell really well on the doorstep.
And outside of NATO, what would British support for, say, Ukraine look like?
Well, when I was at the conference in Paris, there were really inspiring speakers from both Russia and Ukraine. And what they were both saying was, we want this war to end because it is working class Ukrainians and working class Russians who are being killed. And the fact that when the illegal invasion from Russia took place, we needed more voices, obviously, to criticize that, because Putin is a dictator, a gangster, and there are war crimes that have been committed. But Zelensky isn't a friend of the working class either, and those were the voices that I was hearing in Paris. The only people that benefit from conflict in Ukraine and in Gaza or anywhere else are arms manufacturers and people who profit from the arms industry. And that is the kind of economy that we should be not prioritising. The fact that the UK sells arms to Israel, the fact that we sell arms to the UAE, which fuel conflict in Sudan, and the fact that arms manufacturers in this country, whether it's BAE, Leonardo and others, benefit from what is happening in Ukraine is harrowing, and we should put all of our efforts in stopping war wherever it takes place.
On that point of kind of the UK's approach and role in what's happened in Gaza, and kind of where politicians stand because of their relationship, or the UK's relationship to the US, do you think that this Labour government, that the politicians in the Houses of Parliament right now have done a good job at reflecting the British public's opinion on the war in Gaza?
Absolutely not. They are so out of touch with British opinion on what is taking place in Gaza, which is a genocide. And it's frightening because they think that they can week on week gaslight the British public to say genocide is not taking place, even though for 2 years everyone has seen genocide, starvation, live streamed on their phones and their TV screens. I have tried to hold previously a Tory government to account and now a Labour government to account around arms sales. And even now they're still saying we have suspended arms sales to Israel. No, you haven't. You still sell components for F-35 fighter jets that allow 2,000-pound bombs to drop on communities in Gaza and destroy people's lives. So the gaslighting is... I'm genuinely speechless because we can all see what's happening. Yet this Labour government has allowed war criminals like President Herzog of Israel to come with the red carpet treatment. We have provided diplomatic cover, and that's why our position as a party must be an anti-Zionist position. And that means expelling the Israeli ambassador. That means shutting down the Israeli embassy, because you cannot have normal relations with apartheid, you cannot have normal relations with genocide. And that is a key point of difference with the Green Party, because I will have people who say, well, why don't you just join the Greens? There is no need to create a new left-wing party. But we are explicitly anti-Zionist, and that is a key point of difference. When we look at South Africa, under apartheid, South Africa was treated like a pariah state. Israel too must be treated like a pariah state, and that's why we must support boycott, divestment and sanctions. That's why a cultural boycott of Israeli football teams, music, arts and culture must be boycotted, and we must all work in every way possible to end apartheid. It's what generations of activists did in the 80s, and I think that is the responsibility of anyone who calls themselves socialist today.
I mean, no one can accuse you of not raising this in Parliament a lot. I mean, you raised concerns just yesterday about the Israeli government's conduct, and Lisa Nandy conflated anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in her response to your question, which you called disgraceful. Would you say anti-Semitism in this instance was being weaponized?
100%. I did not make reference to any Jewish people in my question. I specifically focused on Maccabi Tel Aviv and the fact that many of their fans who would be traveling here if the ban was overturned are former or active IDF soldiers who have taken part in the genocide in Gaza. And as per international law, our duty would be to investigate them for war crimes, not welcoming them in our stadiums. But because this Labour government's position is so indefensible, you see them blatantly lying and attacking people and calling us anti-Semites. Those smears don't work anymore, and we are not going to accept them. And when you see millions of people in this country, in towns and cities far and wide, taking part in demonstrations for 2 years against the genocide in Gaza, where you see people protesting against the proscription of Palestine Action, disproportionately pensioners being called terrorists, you know that this government is completely out of touch, is using lies and the scaremongering and smears of anti-Semitism because no one believes them anymore. And we see that lying and those smears and the kind of desperate clutching at anything, even when it comes to digital ID. First, they said, actually, it's about people having the right to work. And everyone replied, well, we've got national insurance numbers, so it clearly doesn't work for that. So they just are desperate to find anything that might work. It's like you just throw shit and see what sticks. And that is a government that has only been in power for a year, but has lost the confidence of the entire country.
So I guess you mentioned the Greens just there, and I think some people might be thinking, well, what is the difference between your party and the Greens? Why don't they merge? Why don't they form an alliance? I mean, what would you say to that?
Well, we will work together when it comes to defeating Reform and Nigel Farage and stopping him from getting the keys to Downing Street. And that is very important because we need to work with many allies to stop that from happening. But we are fundamentally different. We are a class-based party who isn't shy about talking about class politics. And I've seen interviews where, there's this idea that people are turned off by class politics, and that isn't true because people see class war when their bills rise, but energy companies are recording record profits, and they see class war when landlords hike their rent without a second thought, and people face eviction, yet bankers are bailed out, and they see class war when the 50 richest families in this country hold more wealth than half the population. So we are embracing class war, and this time we want and plan to win it. And fundamentally, I think it is the politics of anti-Zionism that is a key difference. After 2 years of genocide and of seeing an Israeli government that basically has not been held to account, we cannot have diplomatic relations with a genocidal apartheid state. And that is really important because most people who have seen the bloodshed, the suffering, the starvation, understand that this isn't business as usual anymore with Israel. And so the Greens believe that we can have diplomatic relations with Israel, and we think that is not okay and acceptable, and we must sever all diplomatic ties. And then, of course, there is the point around NATO as well. And I think at the heart of that is the politics of anti-Zionism and anti-imperialism. But it's key to work together where we can, but we have to be honest about our differences too. And also, there's an MRP poll that came out recently that said, despite everything that's happened over the past few weeks, we as your party would win 13 seats. I see that as just the floor. Our potential is much higher, and that is double the number of seats that the Green Party under that MRP poll would get. So we are providing a different option, and that's a socialist option.
Let's talk more about domestic and your party's offer to voters. Domestically, you tabled an early day motion calling for MPs not to be able to serve as landlords while in the Commons. Why is that?
I've worked very closely with Acorn in Coventry, who are a tenants' union, and they support tenants facing evictions. They build that social power that I was talking about. And they contacted me about an EDM, which I fully support, about banning MPs from being landlords. And at the heart of that is the conflict of interest. If you are someone who profits from the private rental market and you're also writing laws to govern that market, there is a clear conflict of interest, and every MP's priority should be their constituents, not their own personal property portfolio. And when we look at the rental market today, where over 1 in 5 renters pay half, if not more, of their income to their landlords, and rents keep growing and increasing. The state of housing, I mean, the casework that I've got around mouldy housing and the sheer levels of disrepair that need fixing, yet landlords can kind of hike up rent whenever they want. That is criminally unfair. And so I am on the side of supporting tenants, strengthening renters and their protections. And what that looks like isn't just stopping MPs from being landlords. It's about a country where we have rent controls, where we have mass council house building that takes place, that shifts power away from landlords to renters.
And I mean, well, 3 MPs affiliated with your party are landlords or receive some form of rental income. Should they support this motion too? Is it something you've spoken to them about?
I think everyone should support the EDM, and if there are MPs watching this, I hope they'll look it up straight after. I think that any MP that is a landlord, and 1 in 10 of my colleagues are, they should look at what their priority is. Is their priority their own property portfolio, or is it about making people's lives better? And when we see the levels of inequality, when we see the levels of poverty, when we really want to change people's lives, I think they will find themselves in a position where they reflect on being a landlord. And I would hope in the future they would change that.
And I guess to pick apart a bit more the sort of like diversity of views within the MPs affiliated with your party right now. And Adnan Hussain previously agreed with a social media user who said that the party shouldn't parrot a neoliberal idea of gender ideology. For parties who might be concerned about what for voters who might be concerned about what your party's stance is towards social conservatism, what would you say? And should there be space in your party for MPs that hold those sorts of views?
I've spoken to so many trans people over the last few weeks who are concerned about what they have seen on social media. And it's really important that we are a party that defends the most marginalized. A politics that doesn't center the most vulnerable and the most marginalized isn't worthy of the name socialism. And that's why we must be loud and clear that trans rights are human rights, and that we will fight with trans people for better healthcare, for safety, and for dignity. And that has to be at the heart of what we're building. And anyone who doesn't share those views is welcome to educate themselves on this. We are not born with the politics of liberation right from the get-go, but it's really important that we understand that when people have the worst outcomes, and trans people do, on housing, on mental health, and all of these levels of inequality, that they have to be fully able to take part in policy, in the structures of the party, and they must be made to feel welcome. And we know that the rise in transphobia is part of a deliberate attempt to stoke culture wars. And just like with the attacks on migrants, on Muslims and disabled people, we see the attacks on trans people as attempts to divide us as a society. And as a movement, as a socialist party, we have to be really unequivocal about saying we are not going to play into those games. We defend everyone. And like the trade union slogan and mantra goes, an attack on one is attack on all. So as a party, I hope the policy will be passed at our conference, where we are unconditional in our support with trans people and around their rights. And MPs and councillors and anyone who wishes to represent the party has to sign up to that, because as a party, we will not have a democratic deficit. And we see that whether it's the Labour Party or the Greens, that conference is not sovereign. Motions that are passed are not binding. So you can have a room packed in Bournemouth and everyone claps and a motion is passed. And then the following week in Westminster or a council chamber anywhere else, elected representatives can do what they like, because, these things aren't binding. So our conference motions will be binding. Our elected representatives are not acting as individuals. They are voices of the movement. and therefore they must be held to account.
I guess to touch on that a bit more, looking forward to November, to the Your Party inaugural conference, what can people expect?
You can expect a democratic conference that will shape the party structures, where there will be debate. Obviously, there are things that I am not entirely happy about. I think anyone who is able to come through sortition should be able to obviously take part in everything, but people who don't get the lottery pick of being able to come to conference should still be able to have speaking rights. So a sortition plus aspect of conference. I think that we need to look at some of the membership requirements, and I think you should be able to be part of another party and join your party, because we're here to unify the left. And while the left has been in its wilderness, you've had loads of campaigns and organizations that have done the work in our communities, and to say that actually you're not allowed to be a member because you're a part of this organization, I don't think is correct. I think people who live abroad should be able to get involved and have an international membership structure. And then I think 14-year-olds should be able to join the party as well. So I think there are things that we need to improve. Obviously, this is the inaugural conference and we've had sortition. All future conferences must have delegates that come through all member meetings. And that's how you have a truly democratic conference. And obviously, every policy passed through one member, one vote is completely essential. And then just to get into the nooks and crannies of it, we need to elect an executive committee. I don't think there should be any MPs on that committee. It has to be led by the movement, trade unions, and our rank and file members. And then through that, you would draw a hiring panel for jobs. It's what trade unions do. It stops nepotism and jobs for mates. I think that is key. And then also in terms of addressing any potential democratic deficit, mandatory reselection and open selection, and should things happen and members aren't happy with their elected representatives, there has to be a tool for recalling as well.
Is radically quite different to the structures of other parties in the UK. And I guess one of the pieces of draft guidance that was published last week was that your party will only have one leader. I was wondering if that's one of the pieces of guidance that you're happy with.
So that guidance with all the other founding documents are being amended as we speak. They're being amended at the assemblies and they will be amended at conference and then only passed if they gain a majority through one member, one vote. I obviously would like that to be a co-leadership structure, but essentially it's whatever the members decide.
So you wouldn't like to see a head-to-head between yourself and Jeremy?
If that's what the members decide, I'd be interested in looking at what that could be in terms of throwing my hat in the ring.
But ultimately you think that, I guess, to go back full circle to kind of where your party began with, like you said, that these sorts of contentious beginnings aren't unusual when you look at wider projects in the European left, that actually this happens quite a lot. These are just teething problems. And what would you say to perhaps a potential voter, a potential member that was maybe put off by that? What would be your
I understand completely. No one wants to see psychodrama, and what happened over the past few weeks obviously isn't a great selling point, but this is an unprecedented task. The job of creating a left-wing socialist party, it has not been done before in recent British political history. And when I speak to people across the country, I say, anything that we see as progress, whether it's the right for women to have the vote, whether it's our workplace rights, whether it's the NHS, they weren't easy fights. Working class communities fought for those, and they came from the bottom up. They came through our trade unions. It was never just handed to us. And so if we are saying what we are building is a socialist party that isn't just here to tweak the system with a little wealth tax here and the lowering of bills here. We are saying we are calling for a fundamental transformation of society, and that means workers controlling the means of production and the wealth that they produce. That is going to be hard work. And we saw what the establishment did to Jeremy when he was leader of the Labour Party. We are not going to have it easy. And so we need to do better, but we also need to have resilience and patience and unity. And it's not easy. It's not easy to be unified and have patience so early on, especially when the stakes are so high. But the threat is fascism that is growling at the door. And if an election was held today, Nigel Farage would be our prime minister. That is a scary scenario for many people across this country. And so what we have to do is look at the path forward. How are we going to stop that from happening? And how are we building a party that will last decades and outlive all of us who are involved in these discussions now? And so, yes, it will take time, but we are doing the work now, and I'm so excited for it.
I feel like that's quite a nice place to leave it. But first, I just have to ask, will members who paid twice under both membership models, will they be refunded?
Yes. So that migration is taking longer than I would like, but it is underway. Me and Jeremy just want this resolved ASAP. So every member, whether they joined under the first portal or the second, has their voice and they have their vote at conference. That is really important, and any refunds will be administered too.
Zarah Sultana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Happy with that? Is there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on?